Hello, and welcome to the Stitch the Season Slow Stitching Series for 2021. Now, all of this series is inspired by Christmas stitching, Christmas images, and prompts. There's a planning and prep video, which I'll link below, as well as prompts 1 through 6, and you can find them in the paragraph below. Today is for prompt 7, and every day I give a different prompt for 10 days in a row with Christmas-related ideas. There are different techniques that I show and just some fun things that you can do. Now today's prompt is prompt 7, and the prompt is for an ornament. So you make an ornament. You might want to make a retro ornament or something completely your own. And I'll show you my process here. So I've sketched out here just a makeshift ornament, a little bit retro, and I found some green fabric so I can use that for the background. I have my piece here, my main piece, and my background of my ornament, but for the background of this Christmas ornament here for the prompt, that's what I'm going to use. I also found a bottle cap here. This is from a candle. That's a nice size that I want to use for my ornament here for the prompt. So I'll just cut that circle right away. I'll outline that circle and then cut that out. Now I also found some sequins that I think I can use to make these little dots. So I kind of make my design and then piece it together with what I have. And I can also modify my design if I find different materials that I want to work with. Sometimes they inspire me to create the design, and sometimes after I've created the sketch, I'll find materials that really enhance it. So I have my round piece here for the basis of my ornament. Before I tack it down though, I want to kind of sketch out those pieces that I drew on it, the stripes and the dots. Now for these stripes, I'm going to add stitches. I could add cording, that's another option, if I wanted to do that, and just tack that down. So I'll give that a moment to think about what I want to do. And then I just want to put my sequins over here. And I like to space them out and then just put the dots individual where I want them to go. So to start with, I think I'm going to stitch these wavy lines. And to really show up on my ornament, I've got to decide what color. I think I'll do that in white because I think that'll offer a nice contrast. And I really like to use the stem stitch for these wavy lines. So I think I'll do that first. I'll start my stitch right from the edge of my ornament. So I make a stitch, and then halfway through that stitch I come up and pull that snug. And then I just follow that path that I've created. Again, I make a stitch the same size as the first stitch, and I stitch inside each of these stitches, putting the needle down or up, always on that line that I drew. I try and keep the loop that I make while I'm making the stitches always to the same side, and in this case it's either top or bottom. I'm going to keep that loop on the bottom. And then I have this beautiful twirled stitch, kind of like a rope, and it follows that curve, that little scallop. The smaller the stitches, the less likely there'll be straight lines and straight edges. It'll be just a nice gentle curve. The same thing with the longer the stitches, the more angular the line becomes. You can think of your stitches as pixels on a screen. So the more pixels you have, the clearer the image. I'll just finish this row. Again, coming right down on those lines just to get that nice image. This also tacks down the fabric that I'm using as the back of my prompt ornament here. and I have that first row done. I'm going to stitch the bottom curvy row, and then we'll take a look at where we're at. So there I have my curvy lines. Now I want to work on these stripes here, and I do want them to be thick. So I will take a piece of just cording here, tack it down, and then stitch over it. That will give a little bit more dimension, and I really like that look. So I like to cut off longer strips than I need, and then I'll trim them when I'm done. I'll start on the top. I have my embroidery floss, thread it into my needle, and I just make sure that my strip here of cording is long enough to cover the area I wanted. And then I'm just going to stitch it down into place with couching. So I'll come up here on one side of the cording and then go down on the other side. And you can do this as many stitches as you'd like, as tightly stitched or as far apart as you like. I'm going to stitch it maybe ½ inch apart or so. And I want to keep my stitches as close to that cording as I can get. The more stitches you use, the tighter it holds it in place. And if I were to use contrasting stitches, it would show up. Because I'm using red, which is just like the cording, it doesn't show up as much, but it is noticeable. So I'll just come in here, find my stitches, and tack that down. Following that curve of the line that I traced, and then when I get to the end, I'll hold it in place and tack it down. I'll knot my thread on the back. I'll just go under a stitch that's pretty close by. And then I can just trim down the cording right to the end of that ornament. So now I'll stitch another row here and show you what it looks like when it's done. So now I have both of my solid stripes with a couching stitch, my curved, and now I want to just tack down the edge, the perimeter here of this green ornament. I have some embroidery floss, just a couple of strands on a thin needle, and I'll start on the side here, and I'm just going to make little stitches, straight stitches all the way around the perimeter to tack down my ornament. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So there, I've tacked my ornament all the way around the edges. And now I want to work on making this little top piece here, the little hanger. I think that adds to it, and it really makes it look like it's an ornament. So I'm just going to kind of sketch out where I want that ornament hanger to go. And then I have my loop here. And I think I'm going to do something a little fun with my loop. I'm going to leave it three-dimensional, so I'm not going to stitch it down. I'll take my gold thread here, and this is embroidery floss, nice and thick, 6 strands. And I'm going to start on one side of the sketch here that I made and just do a satin stitch, which means I'm going to fill in the entire amount with thread. So I start at one end and I just go right to the other. I pull it gently and then I come back over here. Now typically you go very close next to it, but I like to skip just a tiny little space, just enough to make a thread in between. And then I go right across again, sticking right to my sketch if I can. And the reason I like to leave that space is because then I can come in at the end and fill in those areas, and it's nice and snug. So I go all the way across. each time until I get to the bottom of where I want, in this case, the ornament hanger to be. I'll go one more right on my ornament, so it looks like it's hanging on top of the ornament. And now I'll just go in between all those little areas that I left space and see how it finishes it out very nicely and neatly. And it's a way for me to just fill in any gaps that I made. Go all the way up and down. And I really like this dimension that it gives to this ornament hanger. So I have that ornament hanger done, and now I want to make my loop here. So I'll come up and then I'll go back down and I'll leave a little loop exposed of this ornament, just like that. Now, just so that it doesn't stick up completely, I'll come in here and just tack it down with a stitch, kind of like when I'm doing my daisy stitch. I can pull that a little snug. And there I have the top of my ornament. If there's any areas in here that I don't have quite the spacing that I want, I can always come in here and put another row across, another stitch. And then I'll knot that off on the back. So now I want to start adding my sequins. And I happen to have red and gold sequins, so I can decide which ones I want to add or if I want to alternate them. So I'll try out alternating them and see how that looks. And actually, I really like that. So that's what I'll do. So I'll need the gold thread and the red thread. Put my sequins down over here, and I'll start right in the center here with this sequin. I have the gold thread still on my needle from this ornament top, but I don't want that thick thread. So I'll just remove that from my needle, the piece that I have left, and I can pull apart these threads. So if you look very closely, it's actually 6 strands, and you don't need very many to hold a sequin in place. So I'll just pull them apart, gently pulling. Letting it untwist. And now I have my one strand. I'll take a needle with a very small head, just because that's the weight of the single strand of embroidery floss. Thread that needle, knot it on the end, and then start sewing my sequin. So I'll take my threaded needle with the knot on the end, find exactly where I want that sequin, and I'm going to start in the middle of my ornament, because that way I can build out from there. I'll come up from the center, put that sequin in place, and then I'll just bring the thread out from one side. I'll come up in the center again, and I'll go on the bottom. I can do a third if I want. I don't really require it, but sometimes it looks nicer to have an odd number. Or 4 even. And because the 3 are pulling up, and because the 3 strands are pulling up the sequin here, I just want to hold it down nicely. I'll knot it on the back and then continue sewing the remaining sequins, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. So there I have my ornament completed. I think I'm going to add a few little stitches inside the ornament of that green, just to really tie it in. So I think I'll go around these red lines as well as the white ones, just to really emphasize them. So I'll complete that and I'll show you what it looks like. So now that I've added the stitching, it just adds a little more drama to the ornament. It kind of shadows those lines, those stripes. Now I'll just take my ornament and stitch around the front to hold it in place. And I'll show you how it looks when it's all done. So here's the completed ornament. I stitched all the way around, attaching the front to the back, and I have my number 7. So that's how I make my ornament. I don't usually work with sequins, but in this case I thought it was really appropriate. I liked how it turned out. The colors were classic Christmas colors, and they kind of all coordinate with my theme of subtle colors for my 10 ornaments. Be sure to check back tomorrow for prompt number 8. And if you follow along with the prompts, snap a photo of it and post it on Instagram or any social media. Be sure to tag me and I'll take a look at your work. Thanks for joining me.